with HMRC. They promised massive engagement, and up to now we've had one meeting. So, Steve and Gary, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please, and give your overview as to where we're up to and how we feel about it.
Hello, I'm Gary Jacobs from Easy Tax. I'm an accountant that looks after quite a lot of operators, quite a lot of drivers, and I basically do strategic consultancy within the industry, and both sit as an advisor for both of our august associations here as well. Do you want him to do his intro, or can I just make one comment?
Carry on, the stage is yours right now.
So, I tell you what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do was to be able to come here today and say, we spoke to the HMRC, and thanks to Steve and Dave, that we had an engagement with the HMRC, that they made some promises to us, because I don't want to overly egg this pudding, but 2 years ago, the digital platform legislation came in. The idea behind it originally was it was aimed at what they call gatekeeper digital platforms, which is companies that you'd know would, well, there's a company called, is it Uber, I think we all know who they are, but it was companies like Etsy, Airbnb, large digital platforms, and the idea was to ensure that people were declaring who was buying, who was selling, basically how much they were buying and how much they were selling, because it was fairly obvious that a lot of this financial movement was outside the bounds of reporting to individual tax authorities. So the OECD, from a European perspective, put together some legislation. They then rolled it out to various countries, the UK being one of them, but left it to the tax authorities in those countries to decide how it would be rolled out. That was at the point where the HMRC brought out their first set of guidelines. And remember, the guidelines were aimed at anybody that does business through a digital platform. So the actual legislation came in April 2024 for the gatekeepers, and we knew that in April 2025, and most of you probably recognise that that's there, it's behind, not in front of us, it was supposed to be rolled out to, inverted commas, others. And it was at that time we realised that nobody really understood the definition. And a few people that have spoken to me today would have heard me talking about this. I got in touch with the HMRC and said, can you please give me the definition of a digital platform? Because I represent a lot of people who use third-party software within the gig economy to engage with self-employed individuals and passengers, i.e., well, it's actually not buyers and sellers, but let's just say people that are engaging with an exchange of money to offer a service through a digital platform. And they said, yes, we're more than happy to give you exactly our definition. A digital platform is a platform that's digital. So I said, thanks. And then by the way, I wish I was joking. This was the journey that we had, and I'm sure Steve and David will have plenty to say about it. We got to the point where, long story short, probably too late, we had a meeting, and we said to them, and we'll try and paraphrase this down, do you understand the complexity of our industry? We're not asking for special treatment. We don't think we're better than anybody else, but we are highly compliant and highly detailed. And the models that we have, and anybody that came to the session on VAT will have heard, you know, we have a broad section of complex models because the HMRC tends to look at each one individually. So we said, how can you produce a simple guideline to say it? And the answer that they gave us, I'm sure Steve will agree, is they went, don't really know. So we said, okay, how can we help you understand our industry? And they came back to us and said, what we'd like you to do is we really need to understand it. They didn't understand the basic terms. They had buyer and seller. When we started talking about agency and agents and principal in terms of how the industry works at the moment, about the movement of VAT, about the engagement of workers and everything else, they just went, well, we really need to learn because we don't understand enough. We went away to start the process, and then they produced the guidelines. And that's the honest answer. Is what I really wanted to do was come here today and say, yeah, we've had a great time with them. We really understand. They were supposed to be here today. I don't think they are.
It's rude to stare.
And from my simplistic point of view, they haven't addressed any of our issues. They released a guideline which is draft form at the moment, but basically they rubbed out where it said digital platform and just in crayon put in taxi and private hire, so we're no further forward. So we've learnt as an industry that we know what to do now, which is that we need to come together and we need to push back. Otherwise, what's going to happen is we are going to find that in the eyes of the HMRC, everyone is captured. Now, remember, this is about supplying information. We rely as an industry on third-party providers for most of the time for our software. They haven't spoken to them yet. Now, I do know that some of the dispatch companies have started, either looked at producing the right software or started to look at producing the right software, and good for them. But they've had only the feedback from the very general guidelines, and this is something where it's not about are we in a position to be able to feed them the information that they need. More importantly, we need to know who's captured and who's not, and also we need an appeal system to do it. So as we sit here today, instead of coming back and giving you the good news, we're here to try and persuade people to mobilise. I'm sorry, I know that wasn't a few seconds, but I feel better for it. I'm going to pass you over to Steve now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gary. I'll give you a little bit of a history lesson. The Department for Transport contacted me about conditionality and seeking help from the trade. And part of the deal was to go up to Whitehall and meet up with officials and discuss conditionality and actually giving tax references in. And I said, well, could I bring Gary with me because he's an industry tax expert? And they agreed to do that. We went along to Whitehall. We had a couple of meetings with them. We subsequently invited them to our roadshow. Dave subsequently invited him to his events. We were on the IOL, we were on webinars. Conditionality was brilliantly delivered because they had engaged with the industry. Fantastically engaged. There were very, very few problems. It was rolled out. We pointed out they'd need to work with licensing authorities, which they did. We got, fantastic journey that was. With regard to digital platform requirements, it still, for me, is as clear as mud. It's absolutely as clear as mud. And the last letter that I received from them 10 days ago, it was still as clear as mud to me. They hadn't addressed any of the points that we'd made. They'd not clarified anything. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. How many operators here are familiar with and have signed up to registering for the new digital platform requirements? Two. How many drivers here are aware of the digital platform requirements? None.
Well, that was resounding, wasn't it?
So I'd just add a couple more points to that. The reason that the last letter said, unfortunately, operators are people that have websites and they're in scope, and they are platforms, which was news to me because I always thought platform was something in a railway station or something that actually was a software platform. And I wrote to them and explained that to them. They've come back to say, well, we're very sorry, but due to international regulation, and I don't know where that comes from, I didn't think we were in any international regulation organisations currently. I thought we were a autonomous Great Britain. The terms have got to stay. So anybody that takes bookings is a platform, apparently. If you take a web booking, if you've got a website, you're a platform, and they're not going to change it. Drivers, you'll be interesting to know, are sellers. Sellers. They're classified as sellers. I don't know that drivers sell anything. And again, the letter that's come back is a nonsense. This has been the worst engagement with a government department that I've ever had in 50 years. And it's not going to go away, because we work to make it better for the government, for the regulator, and for the industry. So I've never been quite as animated as I am about this, because it is an absolute catastrophe. We had the meeting with them, and it was clear that they hadn't engaged with the trade whatsoever. A consultation was done in 2021, and one operator responded to their consultation. They said it had been rolled out in the media, including the trade media. It wasn't in PHTM, it wasn't in anything that we published. And then on the call, they said, well, we're not quite sure. We probably put it in the Times and the Financial Times and all the stuff that drivers read. No, they hadn't engaged. And I'm absolutely fuming with the insulting letter I've got back from the government department. It's an absolute muck-up, and it needs to be addressed. Gary's equally nonplussed. He's an industry expert consultant. The industry doesn't know about this. Technically, from the 31st of January, you are liable to fines if you don't comply with the digital platform requirements. It's an absolute nonsense. And that's why I posed the question. And I'm not surprised at the answer. We're going to do a survey and find out how many of our members are actually aware of this regulation. Only one person from the industry's 10,000 odd operators responded to their consultation. That's how well they got the consultation out in 2021. It's a total mess.
I think when we had the meeting, we asked them, and the answer they got was they'd only reached out to one operator, Uber. Okay, so we asked the question within that meeting. We said, right, so in your opinion, and the way we read the guidance that you've issued so far, you are referring to seller platforms, where there is a platform that advertises product, the customer buys the product through the platform, and then the platform pays the seller. So you're talking about the likes of eBay, Amazon, Airbnb, Uber, Bolt. You're not talking about A to B taxis. You're not talking about anybody else where the operator is advertising the product, is then passing the booking onto a licensed private hire driver who, by the definition of private hire, cannot directly sell at all, nor can they directly advertise. So the whole platform discussion was a nonsense, as Steve says and as Gary says. We came out of that meeting quite excited because they showed so much promise and enthusiasm and determination that they wanted to work with us on it.
Well, they actually, and they openly admitted to us that they had no knowledge of passenger transport, and they were looking to us to supply that. I mean, let me just talk about one thing very quickly, just to confirm the baseline on this. The legislation is asking for, if you control the platform, you supply information on what they call seller and buyer, which, as far as they're concerned for us, is driver and passenger. The information is related to who, how much, and when. It's a bit more detailed than that. And the way in which you produce that information is highly specific. So when we're talking about the cost to you, first of all, everybody in this room, according to them, is subject to a fine now. Now, the good thing about it is we've actually got it in writing, agreed, that the trade associations representing the industry, they will not fine somebody who is genuinely unsure of whether or not they will allow them to go through the process. And that was agreed in writing in front of us, but has not been agreed on any official notification. So as we stand at the moment, every operator in this room, according to what they say, should be fine, but that's not going to happen just yet. Secondly, if you're using third-party software, which is dispatch software, to have to give them the information in a very specific form, and it's not you haven't got the wherewithal to do that, it's going to cost you. So there is, there's huge costs attached to it before we even start. So, I mean, is everybody comfortable with exactly what the simplicity of what this is and the madness of the fact they don't understand with what we do?
They don't understand with what we do.
Yeah. It's
just one of you then. Everybody else is comfortable?
It's terrible.
Oh, right.
So should we open for some questions?
Yeah, so what we'll do. So as Steve said, when it was the conditionality, we worked tirelessly with them and we made it so streamlined. But the beauty of it is, it didn't just end there, because they kept that line of engagement open with us. And when we said, actually, you've got a problem here, this is making it difficult, they made modifications and they improved it as they went with the conditionality. With this one, we had a meeting with them, they said they wanted to do the same thing, and their ongoing thing was, thanks for your meeting, here's your letter, off you pop. That's just unacceptable. So, that's the view from us. Now we need to know from you if you have concerns, if you have questions, if you understand it, and if you actually understand it and you can explain it to us, that would be nice. Okay, questions? One and then two.
So I registered.
Bless you.
Yes, I did. And then we went through the various stages, and then you have to, as you said a minute ago, report it in a particular format. That's not easy. In fact, it's very difficult to find. So we went to our accountant. Said, "Can you help us with this?"
Well, you don't ask an accountant.
Well, fortunately, he had a tech whiz. So the tech whiz said, "Yeah, I probably can get this. I'll leave it with me." In that, while I was waiting for that to be done, I contacted PHTM, and they said you'd had a meeting, and actually it didn't apply. So I told them to stop because I didn't want to spend any more money, and I went back online and I tried to deregister.
Ah, okay.
It doesn't have a deregistration process.
Welcome to my world.
So I wrote to HMRC, who already are writing to me now, "Why have you not sent us the data?" Because I'm obviously on their radar. And that's still ongoing. About every 3 weeks I get a letter from this lady called Natalie or something, somewhere, wherever they live. And "Why have you not sent us all of your information?" "Oh, well, I've tried to deregister. I'm just a taxi company. We do very little work online. All our jobs are sent to drivers. And I've been told by the MPH, whatever, I don't need to do it." Who told you that? So I've sent them the emails. I don't know if it was you that sent me.
Right.
So I've sent the email to them. I'm
Thank
still waiting
you.
for the response on that now.
Okay, so I think we have our first test case.
So you've got the difficulty of registration and the difficulty of doing the software, which is nigh on impossible for anyone to do because no one seems to know where do you get this particular format from. And then you've got the difficulty that you can't deregister because it doesn't allow you.
And I tell you what the problem is. The person who was corresponding with you wouldn't have known what's happened in the meetings previous to it because the meetings were produced by policymakers within the HMRC. It's now moved in, the HMRC has three sides to it. One that calculates how much money they want from you, one that gets the money from you, and then the one that chases you when you haven't paid it. So it would have gone down to that section, and you're then just dealing with computer says no. I would say to anybody in the room, if you have registered and you don't, and by the way, we're not saying that it may not be, that it's not appropriate for you to register, because it may be, but we are looking at each situation in isolation. As busy as poor old David and Steve and I are, we're going to have to take some of these in isolation and look at them, and unfortunately you're going to have to be the test cases. There will be people captured by this. I mean, it will be, but we need real life real life and real time companies to be able to make our point on how complicated it is. So, welcome to the team.
Is there any timeline for further engagement with the HMRC over this?
I can give you a bit of good news. The letter did actually end with saying we would like to continue engagement with you. The problem is that if you have engagement with people and you try and openly explain what the problem is, and basically they just change a few words in the guidance, and it remains as confusing as it was in the first place, and they're trying to force you to use an industry term that you're not familiar with, like platform. Every operator is a platform. I mean, every driver is a seller. I mean, it just goes back to the regulatory process should be consultation, it should be engagement with the trade, not just with one person or one entity in the trade, and there should be a thorough regulatory impact assessment, and there should be ongoing dialogue that moves in before you actually produce the requirements in law and threaten £1,000 fines for not complying. There's a way to do things. Conditionality was done right. Government department contacted us, we engaged with them, we worked with them. I went to Wales, Gary and I went up to Scotland when they introduced it, and it went like clockwork. We got the Institute of Licensing to promote it. We invited them to a meeting. They attended the meetings. They produced videos, slideshows. None of that has happened with this particular problem. We did invite them to our LPHCA roadshow last year, but somebody called a general election that day, so they opted out of turning up. So there was no, and again, today, 2 of them were due to come. It's a sad state of affairs as far as I'm concerned, because in the letter to us, we had the commitment for them to attend here today. It says due to previous commitments, we can't attend now. I've got to tell you this, I'm going to go as high as I can up the food chain, if necessary, to ministers to say this is not an acceptable way to treat an industry. We want tax compliance and we want a level playing field, but it needs to be clear, and you've got to have engagement with our trade. We deserve that.
Bearing in mind that HMRC gave the 11th hour notification that they would like to attend remotely, as we saw with Jim Wilson in the last meeting, gave all the contact details. That was on Thursday. Then they turned the phone off. Nice. Next question, please.
Gary, I don't know if you recall, a couple of months ago I made a comment on your post on LinkedIn about my engagement with HMRC. I was one of the very few that registered as a digital platform very late in the day. Well, I think it was actually on the deadline day. After a lot of to-ing and fro-ing with them guys before I came across your post, we'd eventually got there in the end where they decided I only had to provide information on app bookings alone, nothing to do with telephone bookings or any other booking sources. Obviously, that's not something our booking and dispatch provider can do. They can't differentiate bookings via booking source. They can't provide the reports that the HMRC need. So any further correspondence I've had from them has been, I sent them a link of obviously the your guys meeting with them and whatnot, and told them until you guys have cleared this up industry-wide, there's nothing I can provide you. They chased me up a couple of times since. I've given them the same answer and referred them back to the same link, and it's radio silence now. What would you suggest, as it stands right now, where do I stand?
Well, and this is, unfortunately, once again, you're the perfect storm, because we haven't had, so we were asked to set a model, and the model would have been the expectation that in the same way that happens in a lot of ways, technology has come into this industry, but we existed before technology. And as I've heard Steve say many times, you know, the legislation and regulation hasn't necessarily kept up with the technology. And this is one of those examples where you would expect, if from our perspective, if an operator had a multiple access points to what they choose to call buyers and sellers, you would be outside of that, because we would expect a digital platform to be a platform in isolation. Now, that would have been one of the models that we would purport to them. I think at the moment, once again, what we've got to say to you is anybody that did register and is having issues, you need to bring it back to us, because what's happened again is you've been passed down to the administrative arm, who is now just chasing you as a non-declarer, whereas we need to bring it back up to the policymakers to make it clear that there's no clarity, that they have to give clarity to the administrative arm, but in order to get clarity, they have to listen to us. So I think anybody that's already, I mean, there are firms of certain size who are going to have to register. You know, and that's fairly straightforward. But it's my greatest worry, and you've just confirmed it, is the ability for decent, and no disrespect, I don't know the size of it, but SME, small to medium enterprises, as we are in private hire, do not have the capability to submit. Simple as that. And what we suggested to them, all three of us, was speak to the dispatch companies first. And by the way, it's not the dispatch companies' faults that HMRC haven't engaged with them. So I'm happy that we will, one of us will take your case and maybe write on your behalf, because all we have to do is refer it back up and make it clear to them that this is why they've had these false starts. And can I ask you, have you haven't actually been fined as yet? Right, well, that's a good thing, because there was an expectation that you'd be fined straight away. But this is the madness of it. There is no format for HMRC to deregister, because there isn't really a format to register. It was a form that was put out, and there isn't the expertise with them at the moment to actually understand what comes back on it. So I'm afraid we're just going to have to take it on a one-by-one basis at the moment. But you need to refer up, and I'm sure we can help you do that.
So pretty much the state of play right now, two questions briefly. So the state of play as far as HMRC is concerned with the active engagement with us is there are no updates. Question here. Stephen? There, green t-shirt.
We went to our accountant, and we also went to legal. The legal was a little bit more helpful. The accountant didn't have a clue. The legal was... We
rarely do.
The legal was, if you don't register, you're not going to be fined, because they haven't actually written to you directly to say you need to do this. He was a little bit more opaque that if you did register, because then you can't use the excuse that you weren't aware. He then went on to say that if you wanted to appeal it, your simple appeal would be its opaqueness, that it wasn't crystal clear enough to exactly, you know, what part of your responsibility is, because a phone call isn't digital, etc., etc. There's a lot of opaqueness in that. So if that obviously might add a bit of sort of security for the guys that did do it, because I don't think it will go further than that. The other part that I think, I got two good friends of mine that used to be senior tax inspectors, both retired now, and I think this is my personal view, talking to them as well, is that all of this is being delayed. There's incompetence there, but there is that's government, isn't it? I mean, it's ridiculous. But I think some of the delay tactics is to see that the inland, for those that don't know, the reason why taxi drivers don't get inspected is because there's no money in it. The Inland Revenue works on, I want more in than I'm gonna get back. So if they look and think, well, what am I going to get out of you, and it's cost me X amount of money, they won't bother. It's a money-making operation. They have to basically bring in more than they spend. So I believe there's a strong possibility that a lot of this obfuscation is, well, let's see what the results are on what we get in. So basically, if there's a load of underreporting, if there's a load of benefit fraud, and we've raked in millions and millions of pounds more than this has cost to administer, then we'll sweep it out everywhere. If there isn't, I think it will just disappear. That's my view.
Yeah, just to add a point, just before the fine threat date, which was the 31st of January, I was on a couple of WhatsApp groups and people were saying, oh, I don't know what this is all about, what will happen, what does it mean, should I register, da-da-da-da-da. And I had one particular member of ours contacting me on a regular basis. Do I register, don't I register, what? I don't know what I'm registering for. You know, what do I have to do? What does it mean? I can't do this with my software. What's a platform? Are drivers sellers? You know, 2 or 3 days before the fine date. That was all avoidable with dialogue and consultation. And the problem is that, you know, I've been 55 years in this industry. I can't be clear on what they want, how they want to use it. Again, Gary made the point, and I think this is critical. We've got some very, very good tech in our industry, and the tech can actually provide us solutions if it's clear as to what they want. But actually, the last letter that's come back has included tips are not included in this reported information. I mean, do we split tips and what drivers, self-employed drivers? I mean, it's a nightmare. It's got worse as a result of the Tipexing over the words and putting in taxi and private hire and saying you've got to do this because of some international agreement we've got. Honestly, we've got to sort this out. And people say, well, what do we do? I say, I can't advise you because I cannot understand what's required myself. And I know quite a lot about taxi and private hire legislation, but I'm absolutely confused beyond belief in what they want. I understand there's probably a reason for wanting to get the information, which is a taxation and taxation recovery reason, but the building blocks they've put in place do not clearly identify what is needed by operators and drivers. It's just not clear.
Okay, that's a question.
Sorry, just to answer very quickly directly, it's not your accountant's fault he doesn't know. I read the accounting trade press, because weirdly enough I am one, and it wasn't widely advertised. And secondly, the confusion. I think this is. Listen, I think I said it before. The interesting thing from my point of view is when we asked them, for the policy makers on the digital platform, if they'd spoken to the people that did the conditionality on the conditionality, and also we asked them if they were aware of the VAT consultation, all really big things in our industry that they hadn't actually, they were aware that they existed. I think they had tea with them, but they hadn't actually engaged as a single thing. So that comes down to the same thing. All of this is about the government's willingness for tax simplification, and tax simplification means we know where the money, how the money's coming in, cashless society. We also MTD, making tax digital, is coming in next year. Everybody speak to your accountant about it. It's going to significantly change. So there will be a transparent exchange of information to allow them to collect your tax at source eventually. So you're right. And really our thing is just about the fact that we've, according to them, as I said before, we've all broken the rules, and we didn't know what rules were supposed to be broken. So, sorry, go on. Next question.
Hi, I just wanted to pick up on your point. I work for a firm of accountants in London, and I advise on the digital reporting requirements for the travel industry in general. So first of all, the way the legislation works, everybody is caught because it is widely written. The reason why it's not being engaged with, I think, comes back to the seminar that Jonathan was presenting earlier today. I don't know anybody that was there, but it's all tied in with this idea of principal versus agent. So it came in to address the likes of Uber and Airbnb, who were, well, Airbnb works as an agent. Uber have now been found to work as a principal. They are then outside of these regulations. So I presume they're the one person that did respond to the consultation, but they're actually outside of it now. And it's all of the people that are still operating as agents that would be caught by this legislation. The reason that it's not getting anywhere, I suspect, is because they're still waiting to find out whether the rest of the country will be deemed to be acting as a principal. And if they are, then these regulations won't catch you. If you're acting as an agent, then they...
I think that's a good point. The problem is the HMRC committee that's dealing with it couldn't tell us whether. So there's no definition from the starting point. I mean, I would say that there is a broader view of the Sefton case. There is a broader view of the Sefton case in terms of, because I can tell you now that as it stands at the moment, there aren't many operators in London, and I don't want to get into other subjects, but there aren't actually many operators in London who have switched from an agency to a principal position because the HMRC aren't actively policing it and everybody's waiting for it to come out. So I think to have somebody turn around and say, absolutely there's VAT on fares for everybody as it stands at the moment, because if you pick up the phone to the HMRC, they don't say that, right? So let's be, and so I'm an accountant in London with quite a few hundred clients and some big operators in my books that are still agent, and I've had discourse with HMRC. So let's be clear, solicitors do tend to see things, bless them, in black and white. It's not quite there, and Jonathan made a very good point that everything is up for grabs at the moment, but we wouldn't have minded if HMRC had that, if we'd have sat down and say everybody's captured and this is why, but we are a partially digital industry as well. When you look at we can't even define from their point of view what a digital platform is, because many of our clients and smaller chauffeur companies, many are principal, but some of the larger apps are still agent in the way that they behave, and there's offshore and everything else. So the point about, and I'm sorry, I'll make you absolutely correct in what you say, but we couldn't even get them to set a baseline of definition for us to be able to move forward on this. What I would say is, and you're super experts in your field. I'm a GP as an accountant. I'm a generalist, but I do know this industry and I've been in it for a long time. The HMRC aren't always good in conflict. They say they are, but they don't always come out as well as they think they are. So I have a belief that hopefully not, potentially we're not going to really know where we stand unless we start testing some of those models, and unfortunately it may well be in appeal that we do that.
Okay, so we've got one final question, but before we take that question, I have got Lisa at the back of the audience here, who I have asked to be on this seminar towards the end of it to give a brief overview of another aspect that was HMRC related, because it was the increase of national insurance for special education needs. So Lisa, if you'd like to come forward, please. Just give us a brief overview of what the campaign was and where it's up to right now, please. Because I know you've got to get to your train first, so that's why the deferment.
I'll keep it very brief because I know you'd all much rather be in the bar because it's the end of the afternoon. So I just want to speak about the vital work being done through the CEN2 committee. It's an initiative that exemplified what we can achieve when we come together as an industry with a common purpose, this as well. The important initiative was brought to life thanks to the tireless efforts of Andy Mahoney, who's sat at the back there somewhere, whose leadership and determination got this campaign off the ground. His work sparked a powerful, coordinated response to a policy change that risks serious harm to our sector and the communities that we serve. The CEN2 campaign was launched in response to the government's decision to increase employer national insurance contributions and lower the threshold. While this policy change may seem technical, its real-world consequences are anything but that. In the school transport sector, particularly for children with special educational needs and disabilities, the impact is profound. They're not luxury services, they're lifelines to the community. Transport providers, many of whom already operate on tight margins, as you'll all be aware of, are being pushed to the brink, and without intervention, children across the country can be left without safe, reliable routes to school. This is why CENTU has been calling for one clear objective, an exemption from the NIC rise for contracted home-to-school transport providers in line with local authority exemptions. The campaign aims to keep the services running, protect vulnerable children and safeguard the jobs of our drivers and our support staff. But it isn't just about school transport. The national insurance rise also continues to squeeze the hospitality sector, which affects all of us, another key part of our trade. With labour-intensive operations and rising overheads, many hospitality businesses are struggling to stay afloat. The knock-on effect hits everyone, from suppliers to small local economies. There is, however, a reason to be hopeful. Thanks to unified efforts, an amendment led by Lord Moylan has already passed through the House of Lords with the support of 278 peers. It now awaits consideration in the House of Commons, and meetings are ongoing through Andy with MPs and Lords across the parties. This shows what's possible when we do work together, not as competitors but as collaborators. Across the transport, hospitality, logistics and beyond, our industries share common values and common pressures. I'd like to thank David, Laurie and Steve Wright for their support in the campaign, and generally for uniting a trade which is not an easy task. We all know it's like herding cats, getting taxi drivers together. Let this be a reminder, change doesn't happen in isolation, it happens when we're united.
There you go, Lisa, I managed to get you
If you've got any questions, ask Andy, 'cause he's far more knowledgeable.
in and out just in time for your train. Thank you very much. And as Lisa says, Andy Mahoney is at the back, and it's a campaign that was joint between the two of them, the Send To campaign, and it was absolutely fantastic. You had a question, did you, sir? No.
It's a very, is it coming through? Yeah. It's a very simple question. You were saying about deregistration. Well, what happens if you cease trading?
You can't pay your bills. Well, this comes back to the same thing, isn't it? We've had no clarity on. I mean, I would imagine that if you cease trading, they will have to deregister you. But as it stands at the moment, their functionality is in the registration, not in deregistering, because it doesn't make any sense to do that. I mean, the HMRC, you've got to remember, you can have contact, there is appeal procedures, there is sensible behaviour, but what's happened in this particular instance is the administration arm have not been given specifics on how it's got to be rolled out. So I'm sure if somebody closed down a business, I think to deregister, I can't say you don't deregister, but at the moment, they, and as the lady said quite rightly, they believe everyone's captured until such time as we persuade them otherwise.
It was just a very simplistic question for a very simplistic situation.
Well, we don't do simplistic with the HMRC, I'm afraid.
Okay, question from the lady at the back.
Hiya, I used to sell on a platform called ASOS Marketplace. I was selling shoes. So I was just wondering, are you sure that taxi companies are like obliged to report, or is it the actual platform itself, like AutoCab? Is the obligation on us or on the platform?
That is an absolutely brilliant question. Well done. Because it would be nice if the HMRC engaged with us to be able to define what a digital platform is. As we absolutely, in our original meeting with them, pointed them to the dispatch companies and said, have you engaged with them? And we will show you the model, because they also hold the data. Although it's not their data, it's a complicated relationship. So the only thing is, if you look at it, they're understanding that most of the platforms, most of the gatekeeper platforms created their own software. When it comes to others, which is the next stage rollout, and it's a very good point made, I think they're waiting to see.
Can we hide from them? Because I feel like everyone's saying no one's engaged. Can we just stop poking our heads out and maybe just hide for a little bit? And what does the actual fine print say? Because, you know.
I think it's a very good question, and I think in this, at the moment, you are going to have to rely on the associations that represent this industry to lead the charge, because we have we know that we have agreed with them that there is that there will be a protracted negotiation to engage with who's going to engage at what level and what, because some people are outside digital and some people aren't capable of doing it. So I wouldn't encourage people to hide, but I think we need to lead from the front there, and this is why we're here today.
And we could use their fine print against them a little bit if their fine print doesn't stipulate certain things. I mean, I feel like if we keep poking our head up, maybe they'll change their fine print and then they'll have like a reason to like prosecute us or whatever. So.
If I could be a bit clearer on this, because the letters coming back are saying that some parts of our trade are in scope. Of course, we have within our trade employed drivers and passenger assistants and various other things, but we also have a very wide self-employed amount of people, some of them in different parts of the country, potentially working with multiple apps. In the chauffeur industry, you've got the potential that one chauffeur could sign up with 200 or 300 companies to get work across. It's a very, very complicated thing. The problem is in the definition of not, and trying to force us. I mean, I just find it offensive to be told that I am subject to an international agreement. You know, we are subject to being called platforms, and we are subject to drivers being called sellers, and they're not going to change. Well, I'm going to dispute that. I don't think that's ethical. I don't think it's right, and I think it's a failure to consult properly back in 2021. It's great to have a piece of legislation, but they're trying to put a square peg into a round hole here. They should have engaged with our industry. It's a very, very, very significant industry. 250,000 drivers in England, I believe. Nationally, 10,000 operators. I know the DFT figures are coming out shortly, no doubt, with the update, maybe. The DFT are smiling. But it's very useful. We're a massive tax-paying industry, and we're very, very compliant. Conditionality worked. If they want this to work, they need to tell us what to do. And they don't need to force us to be subject to an international agreement. It's got nothing to do with the UK taxi and private hire industry.
Just to put it into a little bit more perspective there, one of the examples that they gave within the guidance was if, as an operator, you have dispatched a job to a seller, a driver, and the driver takes the cash for that payment and pays you a commission on that trip, you should be able to calculate from the commission they paid you how much that trip actually was, and that's what you should be reporting. Now, I'm sorry, but within this industry, that opens it up to very, very wide to drivers being sent on a £5 job that then turns into a £25 job, but they're only going to pay you commission on the £5 job. Now you have fraudulent reporting on your hands. And we're playing whack-a-mole here, we really are. And until we stop playing whack-a-mole and we actually hit them on the head, we're not going to get an answer. Where's the answer?
We don't know what the drivers charge.
Sorry?
Your example was commission-based.
Yeah. Exactly.
So the gentleman said
this was the example that HMRC gave. No. Gary?
Yeah, I think the whole point about this is there is a certain inevitability to this, whether we think it's right or wrong, and we're not arguing with that. But what we don't have is enough definition to be able to know what the reporting looks like and what the capture looks like and what the scope looks like. So the obligation is still on them to do this. So I think the truth is we're going to have a fight on our hands individually and as a group to actually make sense of it. And remember, we're running after the fact. You know, as I said, every person in this room should really already been fined. Well, we've stopped that. But now is the time to force it. The point is we can't actually give them what they've asked for. So we need to force them back to the table, which, and by the way, whoever said, where are we? We are absolutely coming back to the table with them, without doubt.
Okay, one final question, and then we are pretty much out of time. Overtime, as always, but never mind.
Thank you. So to sum it up, basically, what I'm taking away from this meeting is we all, as a group, do nothing. wait and see.
Support the associations that are supporting you, and keep your eyes open and keep your eyes, keep watching the presentations really, because we'll publicise it and we will announce it once we get answers. But for now, we don't have answers. So, as we've seen from the example here, and as Gary's explained, if you register, you can't deregister. And so, until we find out whether you should register and get some clarity, it's not necessarily a sensible thing to put yourself in the firing line when actually there isn't a gun there. Okay? Summing up questions, comments?
No, just thank you to you, Dave, for facilitating the discussion today. They're very helpful.
Thank you.
Once again, I wish we had answers, but what I would say to everybody, and just take this as way as Dave said, to not register at the moment for the reason that you have no idea whether you're captured because you don't have the definition, I would tell you, I think in our opinion is still a reasonable point. I would ask everybody that ends up having either correspondence or fines or an approach to refer it to one of the trade associations or maybe through myself. Sorry, say again.
It says on the web page, do you think you qualify, yes or no? The biggest fine is for not answering the question. So if everybody goes on there and says,
no,
actually on the information I've been given, I think it's no, you'll avoid your fine anyway.
And on that bombshell,
Right? Okay. Very, very final question.
Thank you. I received a letter 2 days ago from HMRC, and they are mentioning that there is, from next April 2026, is the last date. Now is they mentioned there's a test period. If you want to register, you register, and there is no fine till it's in test period. And the test period, and if you earn more than 50,000 as a sole trader or as a
That's MTD. That's
it's a different thing.
Yeah, it's a different thing. Oh, it's yet another thing. Same time, same place next year to talk about making tax digital. It's a different thing.
Oh, it's a different thing. So I was thinking maybe because they asked me to just quarterly.
That's making tax digital. I'll be talking about that next year. So I think we've got enough on our plate without that at the moment. But it's a good point.
Okay, Steve Wright, LPHTA, Gary Jacobs, Easy Tax, thank you very much for your time and expertise.